The Saudi money is drying up, and now every golfer who left the PGA Tour for LIV is quietly picking up the phone and asking the same question. Can I come back? The answer they are getting is not what they were hoping for. This week, PGA Tour Commissioner Tyler Rowlap sat down with reporters and said something that anyone who has been following this saga needed to hear. He did not soften it. He did not dress it up in diplomatic language. He said, and these are his actual words, there were rules, and they were broken. With rules comes accountability. That is the new tone from the PGA Tour, and it matters enormously for players like Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau, Dustin Johnson, and every other name who walked away from the tour starting in 2022 to join Greg Norman's Saudi-backed LIV golf circuit. To understand why this moment is so significant, you need to know what has just changed. The Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, which is the sovereign wealth fund that has been bankrolling LIV Golf since the beginning, has officially announced it will only fund LIV Golf for the remainder of the 2026 season. Their exact statement was that LIV Golf is no longer consistent with their investment strategy. That is not a soft landing. That is a funding withdrawal with a deadline attached to it. LIV Golf responded by saying they are working to secure long-term financial partners, but as of right now, nobody has stepped forward. The circuit that promised the biggest guaranteed contracts in golf history, the circuit that Yasir Al-Rumayyan, the PIF chairman, has now stepped down from the board of, is in genuine uncertainty about whether it exists beyond this year. That is the situation, and that is why players are calling. If you have been watching this tour week in and week out like a real fan, you already know this moment has been building for months. Subscribe right now and hit the bell. This is the conversation the entire golf world is having behind closed doors, and this channel is going to break it down clearly. Golf Digest confirmed this week that multiple LIV player representatives have already made contact with the PGA Tour to discuss return pathways. This is not rumor. This is confirmed by sources inside those conversations. Players who spent the last 3 years telling anyone who would listen that LIV was the future of professional golf are now quietly inquiring about the terms to come back to the tour they left. And Rowlap is not making it easy for them. The returning member program that the PGA Tour used to allow certain players back after the framework agreement talks in 2023 is not being renewed. Rowlap confirmed at the Players' Championship that the program was explicitly described at the time as a one-time situational offering. His words were precise. We were very explicit that that was a one-time situational returning member program, and I stand by that, so that door is closed. What the PGA Tour is now discussing internally is a case-by-case assessment of each player, what their specific circumstances were, whether they filed an antitrust lawsuit against the tour, and what penalty they should face before being allowed to compete again. The antitrust lawsuit is particularly important here, and it has not been covered widely enough. A group of LIV players filed a legal challenge against the PGA Tour claiming the tour's restrictions on them violated competition law. That lawsuit complicates any return conversation significantly. Rowlap acknowledged this directly, noting that players who participated in that legal action face additional scrutiny in any return discussion. DeChambeau is among those in that group, and the Golf Digest insider piece confirmed that his return talks have stalled, partly because of it. Brooks Koepka is the one name everyone is watching right now because his situation has already been partially resolved. Last year, Koepka was allowed back under specific terms. He donated $5 million to charities selected jointly between him and the tour. He accepted that he would receive no equity shares in the tour for 5 years, no FedEx Cup bonus money, no sponsor exemptions into the signature events. He had to wait as an alternate at the Cadillac Championship and could not accept sponsor invites through the standard route. Rowlap described Koepka's circumstances as unique. That word choice is deliberate. It is the tour's way of saying what happened with Koepka is not a template every player can expect to follow. Now here is where it gets interesting from a player perspective. Bryson DeChambeau reportedly sought a financial arrangement from the PGA Tour in the range of the deal Jon Rahm received when he left. Rahm's agreement with LIV and related parties was reported at approximately $300 million. DeChambeau's representatives were seeking something in that territory. The PGA Tour did not engage at that level. The talks stalled. DeChambeau, for what it is worth, has also been quoted internally as feeling that LIV underdelivered on its original vision for what the circuit was going to become. Jon Rahm himself has a separate complication. His departure from the PGA Tour created a dispute with the DP World Tour, which is the European circuit that operates alongside but separately from the PGA Tour. That dispute has not been resolved, and with Ryder Cup eligibility operating on a points-based system running through 2027, Rahm's path back to playing for Europe is genuinely unclear at this stage. The players who stayed on the PGA Tour have opinions about all of this, and they are not keeping them entirely private. Jordan Spieth spoke to reporters this week, and his comments were careful but revealing. He said there are too many unknowns right now to have a clear answer on what the return process should look like. He acknowledged that he was glad he was not in the room where those decisions are being made, but he also raised the specific question that is on every remaining tour player's mind. He asked whether the terms should be different for the players who filed lawsuits against the tour compared to those who simply left. That question is not rhetorical. It is the central tension in every conversation happening behind closed doors right now. Lucas Glover was more straightforward. He said there have always been pathways back with penalties attached, and that if players abide by those pathways and pay the same penalties, he can accept that. Brian Harman took the philosophical view that time heals all wounds and that there should be a path back for players who want to return, but Rolap's language tells you where the power sits in this negotiation. He used the phrase scar tissue to describe the institutional memory the tour has from everything that happened between 2022 and now. He was careful to clarify that he personally does not feel that scar tissue, but he was equally clear that plenty of people around the tour do. That is a signal to returning players that the sentiment inside the organization is not neutral. There are people who remember what was said publicly by LIV players about the tour during those years, and those people have influence over how this process unfolds. Rolap also made one other comment that cuts through everything else. He said the tour is interested in having the best players who can help the tour. Not every player can do that. That is a direct statement that not all LIV players will be welcomed back, regardless of what penalties they agree to. Some players have aged out of relevance on the world rankings. Some have not played competitive golf at a high enough level during their time on LIV to merit a spot in a strong PGA Tour field. The tour is not running a charity for players who made a financial decision and now want to root back simply because the financial decision has not worked out the way they expected. The practical picture for players considering a return looks like this. Patrick Reed's situation is the clearest current example of what the process involves. His one-year suspension from accepting sponsor exemptions ends on August the 25th of this year. That is the penalty structure the tour used for a player who was not in the antitrust lawsuit group. Players who were in that group face additional conversations before any timeline even begins. There is no formal announcement of new return terms yet. The tour is assessing each situation individually. The PIF funding announcement has created the conditions for these conversations to accelerate, but the conversations themselves are in early stages and nothing has been formalized. Subscribe if you want this story covered at the depth it deserves every single week. Share this with anyone who has been following the LIV saga, because this week is the moment where the power finally, visibly, completely shifted. What is clear from everything confirmed this week is that the leverage in these negotiations has completely shifted. In 2022, the PGA Tour was reacting to LIV, players were leaving, the Saudi money felt unlimited, and the tour was in a defensive position. In 2026, the Saudi money has a deadline attached to it. LIV's chairman has stepped down from the board. Players are calling the tour rather than the other way around, and the commissioner is standing in front of cameras saying rules were broken and accountability will follow. That is not the language of an organization that is negotiating from weakness. For the players who left, the question right now is simple: what are you willing to accept to come back? And for the PGA Tour, the answer they are sending back is equally simple. Whatever you are willing to accept, it will not be cheap, it will not be quick, and it will not be the same for everyone.